If you're at all competitive, which if you're racing to begin with you probably are, you'll always want to go faster. It's a never-ending chase that we all never quite finish. However, we can do many things to get far in that chase, and that's what we're going to go over in this video. The tactics, practices, and habits you can adopt to become a faster driver. Now, it's important to note that I myself am not a world-class driver, at least at a national or regional level. I'm able to hold my own fairly well, but I'm not at that level yet. With that being said, these tips will apply to anyone looking to get faster at a club or even regional level. Before we begin, however, I'd like to remind you to hit that subscribe button and like the video if you enjoy it. Without further delay, let's begin. This is something I tend to struggle with myself. The habits you adopt or may already have will be a big part in how you perform on the track. RC racing as a whole is very much a detail-oriented hobby, and being privy to these details is very much part of being successful on the track. First, let's start with the habits you should develop off of the track. First, you should always periodically check your car, giving it a once-over to make sure you don't have any problems like seized bearings, binding suspension, and other such maladies that could compromise the performance. This also goes for rebuilding the car as well. Now, I know a few pros out there will have their car in literal box kit form, rebuilding everything from the ground up before a big race, but that isn't always necessary at most levels. A simple rebuilding of the shocks, differential, along with replacing bad bearings can make a world of difference in how your car handles on the track. For shocks and diffs specifically, companies usually sell shock and diff rebuild kits online, so you don't have to buy a full shock set or differential. The next thing that would help a lot would be to invest in a setup board, a camber gauge, and a ride height gauge. You don't need to spend dumb amounts of money on an all-aluminum camber gauge, just grab one that will work and go from there. Same thing for ride height gauges and setup boards as well. As long as they do what they're designed to do, you should be completely fine. After you acquire these reasonably priced tools, it's time to actually use them. And I really do mean use them. Every time you're about to go out on the track, always be sure to check your ride height, camber, and toe in if you can. Sometimes over a bad landing or just general use, these things can go out of whack and change how your car performs for the worse. Now, for when you're on the driver's stand, there are a few things you can do to help yourself become a faster driver. Now, in full-size racing like motocross, touring car, or any kind of racing where you're sitting in or riding on the thing you're racing, the number one thing people do is go too slowly because it turns out living is actually pretty cool. In RC racing, it's the exact opposite, as the number one thing you're going to hurt the most is your wallet. There isn't that same level of self-preservation when driving an RC car on the track, so naturally you're going to want to push it whenever you can. However, there's a simple rule when it comes to driving on the track, and that slower is faster. Let me explain. Very recently, a friend of mine, Gary Cole, was in a qualifier for two-wheel drive stock. He may not have had the fastest lap time by far, but by driving within his limits and not making any mistakes, he won that qualifier. That's the main thing I'm trying to say in this section. By driving within your limits and not pushing too hard, you usually end up going a bit faster than if you were to just send it all the time. This is because when you're pushing yourself to your limits and past them, you tend to start making mistakes. RC racing is all about consistency. When you go on liverc.com, it isn't your lap times you should be immediately concerned about, it's your consistency you should be concentrating on improving. Once you start to get the consistency down, that's when your lap times will start to come down naturally as you gain not only skill but confidence. That's what brings me back to why you spent all that time setting up your car earlier. Having a car that is on the unpredictable side will have you driving a lot less comfortably and thus slower. However, having a car that you have a pretty good idea of what's going on, what it's going to do at any given time will give you the confidence to push the car more comfortably. Even with that all being said, not everything goes to plan, and things can go very, very wrong. If you find yourself making mistake after mistake on the track, I cannot stress this enough, always take a second to collect yourself and evaluate what you need to do on the spot. Mistakes on the track tend to have a compounding effect. When you make one, another is sure to follow. That's why when you do make a mistake, it's important to not try to make up time by driving beyond your limits, as you'll just end up crashing more. Now, once you're back off the driver's stand, it's important to ask yourself what you could have done differently to improve on your last run and apply those things to your next run the best you can, as there's always room to improve. One thing I'd say would help a lot, however, would be to have someone faster than you watch your runs and see what you're doing wrong. They might catch something you might have missed. Like I mentioned before, slower is faster, and this applies to your inputs. This is something I struggle with as well, as I'm used to extremely high grip surfaces like Astro and carpet, where the throttle ends up being an on and off switch, but this simply is not the way to go, especially on dirt. When driving on loose dirt, or even high bite dirt or clay, throttle and steering control is everything. Easing the car into and out of turns will help keep it stable and, well, not upside down. If you find yourself missing up on a specific spot on the track over and over again, be sure to pay extra attention to that spot whenever you come around it to on a lap, and if possible, as in there's no traffic on the track at all, go back and drive that spot over and over again until you can do it with your eyes closed. That's the number one thing that's going to gain you skill on the track: repetition. If you're able to make it to a track on the practice day or even just a regular club race, anything you can do to gain a whole lot of track time will be a good thing. The rule of smooth also extends to cornering as well. Of course, how you approach corners depends on the surface you're driving on, but general idea will be the same. If you look at any racing line on a track, you'll notice that there aren't a whole lot of sharp edges or angles. It's all smooth line and soft edges. Even for 90-degree and 180-degree corners, you'll see that faster guys will usually open them up as much as possible while still hitting the apex. Why do they do this? To carry as much speed through the corners as possible. You can break a corner down into 4 different parts: the braking point, the turn-in point, the apex, and the exit point. Now, because RC cars can't really brake and be on the throttle at the same time, we aren't going to worry about trail braking. Anyway, let's go over the braking point. The braking point is exactly what it sounds like, the part right before a turn where you slow down. When you do slow down, like I mentioned before, smooth inputs are key. Getting too hard on the brakes will sometimes cause your wheels to lock up, and that can make the car very hard to control, especially with two-wheel drive cars. Remember, two-wheel drive means two-wheel braking in the RC world, so braking while turning in two-wheel drive is on a loose surface is a big no-no. The turn-in point is exactly what it sounds like as well. It's the point where you initiate your turn-in. Again, smooth inputs are key to making sure the car stays stable. When turning, you'll want to aim for the apex of the corner. You don't need to hit it just yet, you just need to get close. Lastly, we have the corner exit. Once you're past the exit of the corner, you'll want to smoothly get back onto the power and use all the track to straighten yourself out for the next corner to repeat the process. For the last time, smooth inputs are everything, and depending on your surface, you can either get on the power sooner or later. For example, on Astro or carpet, you can pretty much treat the throttle like an on-off switch. It's not ideal, but you aren't punished for it. Groove dirt or clay slightly less so, and loose dirt you'll need to feather the throttle coming out of corners, otherwise you'll more than likely spin out. The last tip I want to highlight is copying. When someone faster than you passes you, try your best to imitate their line and what they do on the track. You may not be able to copy them exactly, but you may see your lap times coming down as you try to imitate some of their faster drivers. I've talked a lot about your mindset going into RC racing as a whole before, but it really is important. If you go into RC racing expecting to win and being the best, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. Just like anything you start out with, you're going to suck at it for a little while. Simply being patient and putting in the time will not only build your skills, but most importantly, your confidence. Confidence is what allows you to push the car when you see something wrong with the setup wise. It gives you the ability to change things on your car that you'd normally never change. And it gives you the ability to improve as a driver. Of course, overconfidence is very much a detriment and can lead to self-ruin, but having a little bit of confidence on the track is never a bad thing. On the other hand, taking responsibility for your shortcomings is also really important. Coming up with excuses as to why you didn't do well is usually easier than fixing the problem yourself, so that's what a lot of people do. Like I mentioned before, there's always a solution to a problem, no matter what it is. If you don't want to get marshaled, don't crash. If you don't like how your car handles, change the setup, so on and so forth. You have the ability to change a lot of things. As for the things outside of your control, there's no point in getting upset as, like I just said, you have no control over it. This quote is a bit much for this video about toy car racing, but I'm going to apply it here anyway. And it goes something like this: accept the things you cannot change, have the courage to change things you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. If you watch DC animated movies, you know exactly where I got that quote from. If there's one thing I learned over the past year of racing toy cars, it's patience. And that's the most important thing when it comes to your mindset. You can be the fastest person on the track during practice and qualifying, but if you don't have the patience to deal with every race problems, you'll neither have a good time nor place very well. If you have that patience and are able to apply these practices on the track, you'll have a lot of fun in this hobby. That's all for now. If you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you'd like to, be sure to check out my Patreon where I update you guys on my upcoming videos and where you can influence them. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my patrons Michael Williams, Lucas Tarka, RC World Discord server, Casey Nix, and Ben Reeves. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.